Hello, my friends. Welcome to New Kids with a Shop, brought to you by the Arcade Comics, Collectibles, and Games, located in balmy Fort Wayne, Indiana. I'm Matt Cade.
And I am Craig Ray, and this is the X-ODUS. Hey everybody, welcome back to New Kids with the Shop. Today we are joined by Shayne Pace.
Hey everybody.
And Rick Shupe.
Hello.
Shupe-a-doop.
Today's episode is called The X-ODUS. We wanted to put this show together, or just kind of chit-chat a little bit, because the last week we did the announcements for the DC trailer, and then we had Jeremy come up, but coinciding with that same time frame was the 30th anniversary of Image Comics, and we wanted to make sure that we came back around to that and did an Image show. We originally thought about doing this in a format where we went through like dates and times and things like that to be somewhat informative, but decided against that because people aren't listening to us to be a Wikipedia page. So we're just kind of give our feelings about the books and how it basically had, we have the personal feelings that we have. We're going to talk about the books, talk about how it launched and things like that. So Matt, you did a little bit of research. You can kick it off as far as like letting us know how it kind of started, and we can just go from there.
So, Eric Larson, Jim Valentino, Rob Liefeld, Mark Silvestri, Jim Lee, and Will Spartaccio, and Todd McFarlane.
The Todd Father.
The seven came together to create Image in 1992. These men changed the fabric of the comics industry, and in doing so, changed many of our lives without most of us being any the wiser. And it started, you could go back and say it started with the Schuster lawsuit at DC, but basically in 1991, over dinner, Larson, Liefeld, and Valentino, they approached Malibu Comics about possibly joining those publishers, and that kicked off a series of events, which then led to the creation of Image, the creation of Image itself in 1992.
And the name of this episode, The X-ODUS, was it's like a cutesy name. It's a takeoff of it as far as like the big...
Most of them were Marvel writers.
Artists were Marvel writers doing like the X books and such. And
Oh, I just got it because they left.
yeah,
Wah.
Right, yeah. So I know we've kind of had this discussion before, and Matt, you were kind of at the very beginning of Image. You were that was a time period where you were like somewhat in only, but not really following those books.
Not really. I was in high school, and I had other interests and needs, I would say.
Sure.
And by the time I got back around into it, I just honestly, I loved the idea of Spawn. I just could not get into reading of the Spawn.
McFarlane himself agreed.
Yeah.
Actually.
Because what episode, or issue 8, he brings in guest writers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think we had talked, McFarlane had only done 1 through 7. He did the writing and the art, and that was one of the big criticisms of the book was...
Art over...
Yeah. The pictures are real pretty.
Image as a whole, yeah.
Yes.
But Spawn being their flagship title.
Sure.
That with Youngblood, Savage Dragon,
Right, so at launch it was... The very first books were Youngblood, Savage Dragon, Spawn. Was Wildcats lagging because he was still on X-Men, Jim Lee?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I think those were the first 3, at least. Does that sound right to you, Rick?
Yes.
Okay. So Youngblood being Rob Liefeld, Spawn being Todd McFarlane, obviously, and Eric Larson being Savage Dragon. Fun fact of that, though, to this day, Savage Dragon and Spawn are still the first out of the initial few years, even the only ones that have stayed in publication the entire time.
Yes, and both are over 300 issues deep. Which is amazing.
Sure.
31 years solid of Spawn.
and about Spawn, I recently reread the first 50 issues, and they're not, the writing just isn't great, but the conception of the character is awesome.
They are.
Spawn was awesome, and he is awesm.
The archetypes built into it were amazing.
The design is great.
It will make a...
That's cheating. I mean,
yeah.
In the sense that McFarlane had Spawn since he was 16. From a design perspective and like the idea of it. So by the age of 16, he had that idea, and then everything else happened. So I think the parts that we really like a lot. He had already been kicking the idea around for years at that point. And then story-wise, he's like, oh, crap, the superhero needs to do something. He's like, oh, who's the girl I'm in love with? Her name's Wanda? Yeah, we'll use that. You know, it's so it's like there's some elements there of...
He also does he does look and feel like a 16-year-old's conception of a superhero, like a dark superhero.
Yeah.
I like that.
Very edgy.
I couldn't read it because my sister's name is Wanda.
Ugh. Yuck.
I bet she's a pleasant person.
Wanda's.
She's also a witch, Scarlet Witch.
Rick with the kitty's got claws.
Take that, Rick's sister.
I know.
So we have so those 3 books. Liefield still didn't draw feet in Youngblood. I mean, it's hard for me. This is a kind of a hard episode because
We don't want to
And I
get too into the minutia of Image's numbers or publication numbers.
that's not the fun stuff. The
Book
fun stuff
runs.
is there's still a book publisher now, and at least I mean,
Well, if you look at the books that they produce now versus the books they produced at the beginning, they're two
night
separate
and
animals.
day.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Today they make some of the most mature and grown up titles.
Well written.
Well
books.
written.
Yes.
Almost ironic that they were not known for their writing, and now
Now they are known for
they're
the
writing a story.
It's a mature,
drives
like,
it.
you know, you're finally grown up when you have more Image books than Marvel or DC books in your pull.
Because they were doing it was extremely ambitious what they were trying to do, because Image was the umbrella, but there was still Malibu, which became Wildstorm.
Yeah.
And that was Jim's, right? Jim Lee.
But it all stems from them wanting to have some ownership or copyright of the characters that they create.
Right.
DC and Marvel are making millions and millions of dollars a year.
Work for hire.
Exactly. And they were paying work for hire, which means, you know,
Well, and we talked about this recently this
Yeah.
year, as much as recently as this year, with the whole George Perez thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why in the hell do you have to sell a book to take care of this guy that launched how many ships for you guys?
that exactly. You've made billions of dollars off of his ideas through either cinema, television, or just republishing those books or continuing the storylines.
And then you limit the number of those books you even sell.
Yeah.
Which means there was a cap on the amount of money that you ever could have made on this. So it's like,
So that's what I was saying, like the Siegel Schuster suit, and then the Frank Miller deal with DC. It got these guys a higher page rate, but Image gave them a life. Image gave them a living.
Can you go into that for people that don't know, like specifically like the Schuster? I mean, we've touched on it, but I'm not even completely clear on it. Like, what is the deal with the Schuster lawsuit and then the stuff with Frank Miller? I mean, I know there was
the
always...
Schuster lawsuit started because they weren't being compensated for anything, and DC was making millions off of Superman.
Sure.
And it did not. It went. Was it
78.
78.
Around the time the Superman film, they decided to speak up.
Yeah. So 78, they initiated the lawsuit, and it did not get cleared until mid to late 90s. And all it did was give them a $25,000 a year stipend.
It was 20, I think, and also they got some kind of punchback for the Superboy character.
Yeah.
Even though that wasn't what they were looking for. That was the kind of gimme
Yeah.
from the court.
Royalties on Superboy is the...
Yeah.
And the
Which
case was
backfired, if you know the story, because they got that, then they didn't get it. When they went back to trial and tried to fight it again, they were totally shut down because they said, well, you already got something.
Yes.
We surrendered to you. So they didn't have any voice in the second attempt.
And then Miller came around, and he created Elektra for Daredevil and had a very, very, very popular run. And DC was trying to swoon him over, and they offered him things that had never been up. They offered him ownership rights, copyright. He wrote a book just for it to come out and trade because he wanted it to be reprintable. Ronin,
So it was like a quality thing with as far as what Frank was asking from DC?
basically, plus the ownership. But he wanted white pages. He wanted the art to be more vibrant, and he wanted the 6th issue to be collected in one volume, which basically created the trade paperback that we know and love now. So Frank did all that.
So he never wanted it to be serialized.
No, he
wanted it as one
he
story.
felt like the story he already had in his head was 6 issues, and you couldn't make it better by continuing it.
And
Right.
It's an interesting comic that we got. If you guys are listening at home and you're interested, I think the best way to read that would be to get your hands on the Absolute.
Yes.
Sure.
Hey, we're going to give Neil Adams, the fantastic artist from DC and Marvel, props for helping be an advocate for Siegel and Schuster when they finally did get their
That's
pensions.
right.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Yep.
Not only was he one of the greatest comic artists, he was an advocate for creators' rights.
All the different people he helped in that way, and then he was Sienkiewicz.
Yes.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
basically like ended up being best friends. Kind of showed him the ropes and things like that. That was No, it definitely needs to be said. It's a good save, Rick.
Rick, isn't that your brother, Neil?
I had a really good experience meeting him, and he joked around that we could be brothers at that point. It was a long time ago.
Wonderful. It's awesome, though. So,
For sure.
It was a fan meeting, and he had a little corner where he was working with different fans, and he let me sit behind the table with him. So we took a picture together, and he put his arm around me and joked about that.
and if I were there, I would have had to ask him about Dead Man, which is a good time to bring this up. Did you guys know that I have a first appearance?
No, I thought that was.
I
Do
do.
you know
I've got
anybody
a
who has
first appearance of Dead Man?
Boston brand?
It is a Boston brand. It's a gorgeous. It displays well.
You had a similar experience with Stan Lee, did you not? But there was one little difference, wasn't there?
Beautiful girl in between us? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. You showed us a picture evidence of that too.
Vampirella, and I had that picture of me and Neil. Yeah, that was a great time.
Yeah.
Speaking of Neil's, do you think the Vertigo stuff led into this image? I mean, do you think that was an inspiration for these guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it showed him that you can sell a book that wasn't, tights or wasn't superhero
Superheroes.
related. They can tell more adult, mature stories, and they would actually sell and sell well.
So, I guess we've talked about it somewhat, but I guess I've never put anybody's feet to the fire. So, what is that first book then? What is the first? I mean, I think Vertigo is what I think of as
Yes.
far as being like Sandman and all that. But what was that independent book that had any kind of traction?
I don't think it was an independent book. I think it was Watchmen. It was
Okay.
1986, and it showed a different storytelling style, and it was more mature.
And didn't that first Sandman trade though? That's the one that broke the.
That was 89. Yeah.
Yeah, that.
And when was Swamp Thing? Because the early Alan Moore Swamp Things were of that nature.
Those were still DC labeled though, right?
Yes,
All
they were.
Vertigo.
So, but I mean, the first thing to actually go was Watchmen then? I mean, it makes sense to me, but
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe that's just me because I just love that.
I thought it was the Sandman trades. I thought the Sandman was the first one to have a 6-issue trade, and that's what made trades
It was Ronin.
take off. Well, Ronin, but I think Ronin was like
83 or 82.
very, very much its own special thing.
Yeah.
And then Sandman like normalized that, so every
sure.
few issues it would-
Okay. So, in a
I was
weird
totally
way,
lost. I thought we were talking about comics. You're talking about the collected editions, right?
The trade paperbacks.
Sorry.
yeah. Well, the first time that
Senior moment.
because it's relevant today because most comics are sold in that format now.
'Cause
So
you
like that's
can't-
kind of the start of it.
I just can't go out to the store and get a Amazing Fantasy 15 and then read that story. You can now because of the reprints, but even the reprints become valuable
Yes.
the farther you get.
And they're not at Barnes and Noble; they're
No,
only in comic
no,
stores.
no.
So,
The only way to read this is to get it either collected, trade, omnibuses, absolutes.
right, which are sold everywhere at all
Yeah.
kinds of bookstores.
Every
not just
bookstore
comic
has those. Yeah.
So, that is,
Oh, the muffins are done.
Beware the Muffin Man.
So,
yeah.
Craig, of the early like 92, 93 books, what was your favorite from Image? Because you were there.
I was there, so
We were living it.
and that's kind of where I think we talked about this. Like our excitement about this is, it's a publisher we actually got to see launch.
Ground floor.
Ground
yes.
floor. We knew about the books coming out ahead of time. We got those books, and the publisher is still around today. It wasn't some swooped in the middle of the night and then disappeared before anybody really knew.
There's
about
so many that came and went in the
Right.
the 90s.
So my favorite, purely for art purposes, was Wildcats.
Oh,
Because
Jim Lee.
Jim Lee had always been my boy, and
Well, we followed him from X-Men.
followed him from
He was
X-Men.
a hero.
So we can talk about that a little bit too, so it's not so one-dimensional. So I was reading X-Men. I was reading regular
any red-blooded American,
Right.
in the 90s, was reading X-Men.
and Spider-Man, regular
Oh, yeah.
Spider-Man. That was McFarlane first, and then Larson.
Yeah.
So
On Uncanny, right?
No,
Or Amazing.
Amazing.
Amazing Spider-Man.
no,
He's talking about Spider-Man.
Both of them did, but I'm seeing just regular Spider-Man, like
The 1990.
That was
Spider-Man.
McFarlane,
Yeah.
McFarlane did the first 16, and then Larson took over after that. Because on Amazing, it was, I believe it went from McFarlane to Bagley. Right?
yes.
Around 3 whatever.
I was thinking it was Eric Larson, but I'm totally probably confused.
Larson was doing the mainline Spider-Man book. He may have been that too, but I'm saying personally from what I was reading as far as me wanting to jump ship and move over, those were the books that I recognized them.
Wasn't this the first time, like, it was for me at least, the first time I was conscious of, like, following artists? Like,
Yes.
I knew their names, I knew their work, I was, you know.
Yes.
I would buy anything Eric did because I thought he was very dynamic looking.
I love Eric Larson. And Savage Dragon is still probably my favorite of the Image titles.
It was just something weird. They had all of those artists had they had a kinetic
Yeah.
energy
yeah,
to them.
yeah.
And it was like you could
It was something new in the game. I mean,
very detailed, like, but for me,
a lot of bullets, a lot of pockets, a lot of
nothing
muscles.
gets better than a Jim Lee Batman for me personally. Like, I love Jim Lee's Batman. That's just because I grew up that way.
true.
Though.
That
So,
608 cover,
Yes.
the second printing.
Can't beat it.
Yes.
like I don't think I up to that point had been more excited to find out that he was doing, because most of the time, you know, cover and interior were
Yeah.
different, right? And
Yeah.
Jim Lee did the whole thing. Like, Jim Lee was on covers and Jim Lee was on interiors for that entire Hush run, and it was fantastic
yeah.
for me. So, so Liefield, if I'm honest, like, I wasn't really a New Mutants or X-Force guy.
See, I was.
See, I was straight up X-Men, so Jim Lee, and I was 100% Wolverine for Silvestri.
Yeah.
Like, and that's where those guys, that's where the love came for me. But I wasn't a New Mutants, and I wasn't an X-Force guy. So
I had a
Liefield was
crush
kind
on
of,
Boom Boom. I don't know what it was.
Sim feet, yo.
What are you gonna do?
was the writing good on? I mean,
No, but it was fun.
okay,
Yeah, and especially to a 9-year-old. Yeah,
because it was what, a 2-year period that was Cable, and then immediately like Deadpool and Domino, and
yeah.
then
Yeah.
And of course, like, Liefeld is the one. A very Liefeld move. He changed New Mutants to X Force.
yeah.
It got extreme. But I was
it wasn't
there.
called Awesome Force.
Awesome Force.
Awesome
yeah.
Force.
Just
Great force.
yeah. It was
Well, which is funny because then
pounding Red Bulls, kicking dogs, and drawing comics. Woo! X Force. It was
because
great.
everybody had cool names for their companies, and his was like Awesome Books. Well, I need to look it up. That one I am going to look up for reference because. Oh yes, it was Extreme Studios,
Extreme Studios.
later renamed Awesome Comics. So you were like exactly dead on. Like, it never got any
guy.
more than that because Todd McFarlane Productions, owned by McFarlane, and that's to this day still runs. That's where the toys and everything else
Yeah,
goes under.
yeah.
There was Highbrow Entertainment, which was owned by Larson. Shadow Line, which is Valentino. Top Cow, which is still Silvestri. Like, he still sells his stuff through there. And then Extreme Studios is Liefield. And I believe, Aegis was owned by Lee, which later became Wildstorm. That's what that one was. Which at some point was Malibu as well when they had the talks. But
I think we should touch a little bit on the failed launch of Darker Image because we got Sam Keith's The Max from that.
that stuff was fantastic.
And
That was
that-
the good
I love
stuff.
that.
That is a sea change of a comic right there.
And The Pit, same time, right?
Elkion, yeah. Wow.
And what Cyberforce and Shadowhawk wasn't part of that, right? That was part of the initial launch
Image, no.
as far as that stuff. But all right, let's give some of this some structure. We'll stick with the Spawn thing because we kind of moved over there, and then well, guys, I was talking about the books that I was getting into, like trying to move over.
geez,
Right? So-
sorry.
No, you're good. Good.
We're meandering,
We went, we went out there. So, as far as I remember buying, I bought Youngblood, I bought Spawn, I bought Savage Dragon, and then a few months later, I remember that was when like Wildcats and Cyberforce came out because Silvestri and Lee, I think, were still finishing up Wolverine and X-Men. So I was already looking at the Image books before my X guys left. So I naturally made that transition over. And I recognized immediately that the stories weren't there, but I also recognized that, like, in Wildcats 5, nobody in Marvel was taking a chance on a 4-page spread.
Yeah, that fold out.
Like, remember that?
Yeah, it's the big gatefold.
But it comes back to what we were saying about Spawn. Like, it wasn't good. The comics weren't good, but the character is awesome, and it looked awesome. And
I bought so many Spawn books just for the frickin' cover art alone, and that's why.
They're fantastic.
Yeah, they are. I mean,
They still are.
yes.
And
But I mean, the most important Spawn was stolen from
Gunslinger.
Mr. Stephen King. Yeah, Gunslinger Spawn.
That is my favorite out of everything that's come out of it.
Isn't it funny how many things come full circle
Yeah,
in this
yeah.
hobby?
Yeah.
It's Ka.
Well,
Like a wheel.
and I think to give Nerds. The Spawn, for a fact, but I don't know what the other book is, but Spawn is still, like, McFarlane himself subsidizes that, right?
Yes, it's
as far as the cost,
$2.99.
it's still $2.95 or whatever.
$2.99, yeah.
$2.99.
Because he takes a part of that. He takes a cut out of that, so it stays that way. And I think the only other $2.99 book we have anymore is the Batman Adventure, or is it Batman?
The ones they try to cater to the children.
Yes, that's the other $2.99 book.
Because the one that was hanging around was Saga, which just changed when it just came back.
I know they went,
They went $3.99, folks.
a whole $1.
You got to give Todd some credit for that.
Oh yeah,
No, absolutely.
Class move from the Todd father.
Plus, I mean, besides Neil Adams for me, Todd drew Batman.
Yes.
423 has the best Batman cover. Jeez, Al.
I'll still throw in another vote for year 2. I think it's good. I think it's awesome.
It's good.
So yeah, Cyberforce, Wildcats, and then later on when they could come out, the Max and Pit.
Blood Wolf, Death Blow.
A few years after that was Astro City, and I know you liked Astro City, right?
I love that. And I religiously bought that and read that. I loved it.
So I did not. So if you want to chat about Astro City and let us know, like I never got around to it. It came back out again this past year, and I tried to read it, and I don't know if I was missing something or what, but I did not like it this last.
No, I like it. It was, and I like that they brought Busiek in to kind of bring some of the. It's like an old-fashioned superhero comic book, but it was still it wasn't ironic. It wasn't post-ironic, but it did deal with the world as it is, but in a slightly cynical way, but not in a way that turned you off. There is still like some just classic superhero stories in there, and I think it was really great for that. I mean, Alex Ross did these great, inspiring covers. The characters, they were separate arcs because it's kind of a anthology thing, and each arc is based on certain characters and based around certain characters. So it was one of the first like really strong hero character driven stuff that Image did.
Like from a writing aspect. Sure.
It seemed real
Bring in the
Silver
pros.
Age to me. It reminded me of things I started with. And then, like Shayne said, it had a little bit of a cynical twist that I sometimes wasn't expecting, but I liked.
But never the just impossibly hip postmodern take on superheroes being fascist. It was always like it's a book that still loves superheroes. So
Yes.
yeah.
That's one I should probably. I meant to go back and read it when the new series came out, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet.
I can't speak to the new series, but they're re-releasing the classic series in Metro Book.
Okay.
Compendiums. Third one just came out, and I suggest reading those because they're mapping them in order because they were always harder to read in order because they were never following just one character. And this
so they put them together as far as following storylines.
This one maps them, yeah. So
that's awesome.
Yep. So it's a lot easier to read, I think.
That's cool. Did you read Youngblood?
Yeah, at the time. Didn't really stick with me because I mean, I was like Wildcats. I wouldn't even remember too much if they if I didn't have the if I hadn't just reread it again, and if they weren't because they incorporated them into the DC universe as they did with My Beloved Gen 13.
We need to get to that.
Oh, we will. But yeah, no, nothing. Who's the one that from the Youngbloods that has kind of made it over? The Red
Prophet? No, that was different.
Grifter.
Grifter, yeah, and
Grifter was Wildcats, not Youngblood.
Oh, geez, see,
I knew he was talking about that.
yeah,
Right?
Grifter's working. Grifter's still around in the DCU.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's had a book.
DC,
He had a Christmas book, which is weird.
They had an unusual face mask that I thought stood out, among the heroes.
Look at that.
Yeah, I think.
Looks like Shatterstar.
Yes, his first appearance is Wildcats one, so Grifter. is Wildcats.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep. No, I remember because I liked his design a lot, and I liked the what was the other guy that had like it was like Terminator. It was totally Terminator 2 influence, like the Liquid Clawsy guy back at the time. I don't know. But I think that one was actually Cyberforce.
Oh, yeah.
We probably should have read some of these books before we had this podcast.
I don't think we're missing much.
No, I mean,
I think most of them are down in our 50 cent bin, so.
yeah,
They
it's
were
more,
beautiful to look at. And
Yeah, I'm getting more
good to read.
Paging through
It's
them.
more of a nostalgia thing. For me,
Oh, yeah,
as
yeah.
far as the image, because talking about those books then, I mean, reading between 8 and 12 is like very, very lumped together for me in my head. As far as like, I can't differentiate which year specifically it was. I just know it was
all
all in that time. I just remember being extremely happy because all of these things were happening.
And we should point out, like, Image was everywhere. Like, it was such a big deal. Like,
It was such a big deal. DC had to kill
DC had to kill Superman just to
make a
stay in
point.
the game. Yeah.
Hey, look, kids, we're still relevant.
But yeah, Rob Liefeld was on. He was doing Levi commercials. Rob Liefeld, directed by Spike Lee, no less. And it's like
So unreal.
These guys are rock stars.
It was so bad though for Marvel that they even asked Jim and maybe Rob to come back for a 1 year boost of their characters.
In the wake of Onslaught, the Heroes Reborn.
We can. There's no material to even talk about. I think we have to move on.
Of what? Onslaught?
Yeah, from Onslaught. Like what?
What a dumb.
It was. I don't know.
What a dumb.
That's my one sentence.
I'm really interested in your perspective, though, Rick, because, and no offense, but I was way too young I wasn't paying attention to anything else outside of like what I cared about. So I went from those books to the Image books, and I pretty much severed ties. Like I legitimately just abandoned X-Men. I abandoned Wolverine, like when Silvestri was gone.
Yeah, I got about 5 issues into Fabian's run.
Yeah, and then I was like, no, because I think it was right at the end, like Magneto ripped the adamantium out, and I was like, okay, where does it go from here? And then I was like,
yeah, I mean, I'm not breaking you around here, but after Claremont left, it lost a little bit of its soul.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. But from your perspective, Rick, being, you probably weren't just hunting down shiny things like I was as a 10-year-old. Like, what did you get into those books?
Literally shiny, by the way. They made the covers
exactly
literally shiny.
The Wildcats 2 that had like the ringlet foil. Do you remember which one I'm talking about?
Not really.
Oh man,
but I don't doubt it. I mean, we were basically parakeets. It's shiny. I'm walking towards it.
Yeah, that was how they got like an extra.
Being surprised at my reflection. I'm sorry, I keep talking over you.
No, you're fine. So, Rick, from your perspective, like during that time, like how did you feel about those books at the launch? Like, were you excited about there being a new publisher? Or were you just kind of like, oh yeah, we'll see how long this lasts?
Well, again, I was a Marvel and DC fan for most of my life, and there was a sense at the time for the older fans that this was a kick in the head by people we had supported, doing their work at Marvel and DC. Later, common sense set in, and we realized they were trying to get creators' rights and copyright values for characters they were creating, and it made sense. But at first, we hated it.
You just wanted to see your favorite people drawing your favorite characters.
Yes, we wanted to see good stuff continue. I mean,
and it was
unbeatable.
It was kind of just abruptly all new superhero teams everywhere that were just.
And they were crappy. I mean,
the
stories were horrible. The art was great, but the stories were unreadable.
And they recognized very quickly they had that problem.
Yes.
Like they were launched in 92 and 93 is when that debate happened where McFarlane got his ass handed to him in Philadelphia. Was like, oh, great art, guys. What about the comic books? And they're like, I mean.
No,
yeah.
Yes.
I'm saying accepting for I enjoyed Savage Dragon. I don't know why. Everyone has different feelings.
Wonderful. I think it's still great.
But it hit me. It connected with me in a Marvel kind of way. I guess I like that. And what really then, I made some notes to myself that the 3 that came in later that I did find excellent with the Sam Keith Max and the Dale Keown Pitt and the Kurt Busiek and Brent Anderson Astro City. Those connected with me more than Spawn or Wildcats or Cyberforce are the ones that people want to talk about.
Those are definitely quality books.
So how far along were those? I mean, there was a couple of years, right?
Astro City was 96.
So they were 4 years in at that point before they had. What would you say, in your opinion, was their first quality book that came out where you were like, okay, this is a complete package?
I think chronologically probably would have been the Max, but I wasn't there for that. I was watching the MTV show The Max, trying to be cool.
Astro City came out in 95.
95.
Okay. So 3 years then.
But I was a Savage Dragon from the first. So
and Savage Dragon. Savage Dragon, I would 100% say is a objectively good, excellent.
Because he's a police officer, right?
Yeah, from Chicago, right?
That made it kind of more fun.
That's awesome.
Sure.
Local, kind of.
That's cool.
I don't know how it is that he was the one for me that translated over from the competition, as it were, and some of the others didn't. Who I love their art, but I just don't know why their
I
books
think the
didn't.
quality of Savage Dragon just came through. There's just no way to, and it kind of got roped in with the rest of them at first. Like, oh, they're all bad. But it's like, oh no, that one stuck with people because
he was a dragon that joined the police department to help fight crime.
Yeah.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, and it was one of the few that
got
actually
so
made-
much ass too.
It was one of the only. It was one of the 2 books that actually hit deadlines.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Like,
Larson makes a
Larson
big
was a
difference.
pro.
You could count on
He was
Savage
very
Dragon coming out.
professional. Eric Larson was very professional.
Because I think that was what. So they had an amazing year.
And Larson has written and done the art the entire
the
time.
entire time that is some gangster.
For 30
Definitely
years.
needs
While
back.
CFO, is he CFO at this point? I believe
I think he was CFO. Yeah, at
he
one
switched,
point.
but he's CFO. I think currently.
Yeah.
Because creative is Kirkman now,
Kirkman.
right? Okay, yeah. We'll get to those more interesting Image years. Right now, I'm just taking a trip in a time machine.
I love it though. This is when I was cruising the.
Dude, it was indescribable.
This one I was getting my comics from the mall.
But it was the same time period
awesome.
where everybody was buying them. Like it was, it was everything that was happening right then. And
And the death of Superman and all that was all around the same time frame. Yeah.
Here's a question. If
what was the figure that we came? What did it say? We were reading up on this, and Death of Superman it made in that one day. How much was it? $10 million.
yes,
shops?
it was $30 million that made one day for comic book stores.
Which I think would translate to $10,000 in sales just for Death of Superman per store at the time, assuming there was like 3,000 stores.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My store had a line 2 blocks long, and I'm not exaggerating. And that's maybe being conservative. And we're talking single file, 2 blocks long. I've never seen a comic book sell like that.
But a question I have is going back. The problem with
Insane.
in the 90s, the biggest problem was the people were buying 2, 3, 4, 5 copies for speculation.
Yep.
And the market crashed. My question is, if people weren't doing that, would Image have survived? Because
Buying 7 copies each?
well, I'm saying because people were buying.
There's no way. Because they hit a slump even after that.
Yeah.
Like, so I think.
But they were selling
each
books just 'cause
person
they were new.
paying
Yeah.
$15 for one of their books on those. Because when they come into the store, they don't come in like there's 10 copies of number 1. There's like 10 of 1, 2,
Yeah.
3. Like people were buying runs in that quantity.
And the same thing with the Death of Superman books. What's the
The return.
is it 681? The die cut blue cover. We had
For
one collection came in.
Action.
Was it Action?
Well, Action would have to be.
We had 681
Adventures
Action, yeah.
was 500 when he came back. Adventures
There
of
was
Superman.
30 copies of that one book in a single collection that we bought.
30.
30. That's what I'm saying. And if people weren't buying books like
people
that,
thought they were
then
going to retire on this stuff.
yeah. But if people weren't buying books like that, then would Image still even be here? Because they weren't really doing anything new. It was just rehashed superhero stuff with
Only
better art.
Shadow knows for sure.
Thank you, Ken Elward. Hey, my friend here, Craig, told me once a great story about his getting a copy of The Death of Superman. You want to tell that story?
Yeah, I can tell that. Yeah, because it's relevant at this point. So this is actually, oh man. So as back in origin story episode, I talked about how I was growing up in Springfield, Illinois, and we had our comic shop there. And one thing that I regret, which I guess this is going to give me an opportunity to, is I never really mentioned that it wasn't like I visited this store and I was happy when I went. Like my folks were all in. Like they took me every Wednesday, and I picked up my pull box every week, and I did not miss a meal as far as that. Like they were very on board and very supportive, and that's why I was able to carry the hobby through. Because obviously, as a 10-year-old kid, like I had no way of getting around myself. So there was that, and then there was a big deal. Like I don't think anybody even understands. Like even people that are into comics now, you have no idea the cultural
Before the
relevance.
internet hits. Before
newspaper articles.
Stuff was on
the
Dateline.
news,
Yes.
Dateline. It was a big deal that this was happening. And as a kid, I was losing my mind at the thought that this was going to happen, and I was going to be in school, and I was not going to get one. Like, so I pleaded with my parents. I begged and begged and begged. I was like, "Can I skip school and go stand in line and get this book?" And my dad was like, "Absolutely not. We support you in this, but you're not skipping school for a comic book because that's more important." And I was pissed off. I can't even tell you how pissed I was. Like, that's probably the most angry I've ever been a single day at a day of school. I mean, all day I was like, man, screw my old man. He doesn't understand. So,
however, he was doing something very nice.
However, yes. Fast forward to the end of the day, I get off the bus and my dad's car is in the driveway. I'm like, well, that's odd because he's never usually home till like around 6 or so. But I didn't put it together where I was like, oh, this is probably a good thing. So I walk in and he's standing in the kitchen like holding 2 of the black bag versions and a copy of the regular just direct version because he's like, and I know you want to read it. You know? So
cool day.
He knew it.
Yeah. So
Do you still have the armband?
I never opened my bags.
Oh, yeah.
So the answer to that is yes.
Yes.
So I never opened those bags. I read the first print on there, and it went on to like, however many prints do we have now? It went into a 4th print organically there, right?
The Death of Superman omnibus is in its 4th printing.
Yes. Wow. It was a big deal, and I honestly felt like I don't feel cheated with that story still, even when I read it. Like the layout is very simple. It's like we're gonna drop Doomsday out of space. He's gonna land in, let's say, Iowa.
We just created a Superman murder machine, though. Doomsday just came out. I don't know, like, how do we kill Superman? I don't know, just finding out a guy that can punch him to death.
And it was like issue to issue. It ran across all the Superman books, and it was like this issue, the Justice League get their ass kicked, and then the next one, it was like 2 or 3 more would get their ass kicked, which culminated into he ends up in Metropolis, and it's like squaring off with Superman. Which, out of this, I'm just now thinking of it. That book had some spreads in it. Do you think that was inspired by the competition?
Yeah, no.
Or do you think that's the way that story needs
and
to
I do
be
think
told?
that structurally that is how it should have been told. Like it gets
They lost
panels.
8% of their market share, and then they had to kill Superman.
That
Basically, because
yeah.
And didn't the images start out in traditional form?
and then they
kept getting larger and larger
until they're full pages, and
Yeah.
it's really well
Very
done.
clever.
That was Jurgens. See, I'm jealous of that. Like that is awesome because growing up, me and my dad lived in the exact same house.
Right.
But I didn't get Superman.
Man,
dun-dun.
that gets me every time. I was like, and I'm like, oh, he's done.
Sorry.
No, I'm very.
I read it later.
I want to put a plug in for all the older fans that I still think the best Death of Superman is the original one from the Silver Age, where Lex Luthor kills him finally. And
I got this gun.
It's considered back then they called them imaginary stories, which would be like a single issue that would go off track and do something.
Marvel's What If.
Yeah, but before anybody else was doing
Elseworlds, right?
Before anybody called it that, it was DC's original way of doing things that no one else had thought of. Of course, they're comic books, so they're all imaginary stories.
Yeah. Speaking of Image.
Sure. No, but that one ties in
absolutely.
very well because
Very
the
much
impact that they had on it for
The,
perspective. If you weren't there,
and all part of the comics atmosphere of the time. Like between that Image and X-Men, just
all hype.
yeah.
So much hype because all that hype directly led to us getting any kind of cinematic universe. Like that's where, if none of that had happened, I feel like there wouldn't have been those Spider-Man movies, the Sam Raimi ones. There wouldn't have been the X-Men movies.
And it's weird too, going back and looking at their original books or the early books. 4 of their earliest books are on their top 10 bestsellers.
That's actually name those because I think that's an interesting list. In
So Youngblood ran from 92 to 94.
Okay.
Witchblade ran from 99 to 15. And
Yeah,
then
the TV show.
Savage Dragon 92 to present and Spawn 92 to present. All 4 of those titles came out of the 90s, and they're on the top 10 of what Image has ever sold.
So just to think about that, to let that run its course in your head, I mean, because we've looked at this list, so to think about that is 4 years of the Youngblood in the 90s.
3 years. So it's 92,
3 years.
3, 4. Yeah, 3 years.
Has more or higher sales than any subsequent book, no matter how long it runs.
Monstrous.
Monstrous numbers.
It beats Monstrous.
And they don't have feet.
None of them even have feet. It's not even a complete comic.
I showed you guys the picture of Liefield and Eazy-E. Just he was a customer
Yes.
in LA shop that he was just a comics fan. But that's how pervasive it was in the culture. It was just everywhere.
And people were buying multiples, like you were saying.
For sure.
Yes. But
People's financial advisors were telling them this is what you should put your money in. It was The 90s were wild.
The stock market, you're like, no, Rob Liefield. That's where you, that's where you need to put that cash.
Cocaine and Action Comics. That'll take care of you, buddy.
That'll take care of you.
Take your kids' college tuition. I'm going to be able to send them to Harvard.
Exactly.
But I mean, we also, like, Robert Kirkman wrote 3 of their top-selling series of all time as well.
So yeah, the rest of the list. I'm sorry I interrupted.
Well, so Kirkman wrote Walking Dead, which was from 03 to 19, Invincible, 03 to 18, and he wrote Kick-Ass, which has been ongoing off and on since 2008. So,
I thought that was Millar.
I thought that was Mark Millar for Kick-Ass.
oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I apologize. So
No,
2.
no.
Anyway,
It's all good.
I've not written one.
But that's when they got good. They got writers.
Yeah.
but Tenian's on here too. He got Department of Truth, which just started in 2020.
Can't believe it.
And that's the other thing is Kirkman is the only person to join
After
at a
this
C level past the initial
buy-in or start,
buy-in, right?
Yes.
But the first class did promote a lot of great new artists, like Michael Turner's
Yep, Witchblade work.
Darkness and Witchblade, and then J. Scott Campbell, who helped create one of my favorite. And at the time, I was just obsessed with Gen 13.
Why?
I think it was
Just likes numbers.
just tailor made for a 9-year-old man. Some other one. Let's not pretend the design of Caitlin Fairchild is not just. I mean, it's just gorgeous.
Absolutely.
And perfect. I love the suit.
I know why. I want them.
You
I
know,
want everybody else to know.
I
why.
didn't know that redheads were a thing for me, but turns out.
Turns out I like redheads.
Turns out it's one of my jams. But it was like for a kid who was trying to be cool, and then it was a comic about 90s kids who were impossibly cool and had superpowers and were very attractive. It was so 90s. So I'm going to go through the names. There's Fairchild. There's Bobby Burnout Lane. Roxanne Freefall Spalding. This is the first 7. Sarah Rainmaker, John Lynch, and Anna. But then there's Percival Edmund Chang, known as Grunge.
Nice.
And it was just, and you're just like, I read every, like, these I actually thought were brilliant. I was like, there's Joyce, there's Tolstoy, and then there's Gen 13 comics at 9 years old. Like, these are amazing. These are so good. I'm the guy that loves the 90s Justice League. And yeah, so every week, and this is one like, well, every month, my mom would take me and let me get a Gen 13 comic, which at that point, you know, knowing my mom, I'm very impressed with her. Because there's some racy covers.
Yeah.
And I just want a memory of the time there is like I would always go and I would see like posters of Bone, and posters for like these other comics that were just
Jeff Smith.
and the Max that were like they just seemed so like out of my reach. They were just so impossibly cool.
I forgot that Bone went over. It was one of the really, really independent books went over to Image.
and I was just so and I was enamored with these. And then later, a few years later, when I got my hands on them, and they were as great as I thought, but they were so impossibly cool. And I was like, you know what, Gen 13 is my lane right now. You know, that can be my thing, and it was my thing. And then the fact that now they're incorporated into the DC universe proper is just icing on the cake for me, and it's a delicious cake to begin with. Yeah.
Can I feed you guys another tip that maybe will start something?
I wish you would.
Growing, and that is not someone I was fond of when he started, but I hear he's really, improved and become quite exciting. He had a book called Hell Shock, I think. His name was Jay Lee.
Yep.
That Image had, and I guess now he's like one of your favorites, right?
He did all the Gunslinger covers.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's why. The Dark Tower
Did he
covers.
start with Image?
Yeah.
Oh my
Hell
goodness
Shock.
gracious.
Yep. So that was a long time ago. That was one of the first. That came out the same time period as the Max.
Yeah,
and
Max.
Pitt and that. Yeah. So stylistically, I think he switched. He had changed a lot since then, even.
But that shows that like Image cultivated talent.
Yes.
And promoted talent.
The artists ran together. I mean,
Yeah.
they saw the opportunity.
Yeah.
Because there was something there, and there was at least some excitement, because I think we had talked about it, and Spawn ended up getting after 7, he had taken the criticism to heart, and I think he'd gotten some big time writers in there. Like Gaiman did a few books, right? 'Cause that's the controversy with number 9 with Angela.
Yes. Yes.
You also had
Alan Moore,
right?
Chris Sims,
Grant Morrison at one point.
and Frank Miller.
Yep.
Yeah.
A bunch of people. I mean, he had some names in there, but I think part of the frustration as a kid, even especially as a kid, because like time feels like forever. Even worse than it. I mean, I feel like as I've gotten older, time goes faster, and it's a cliche, but like as a kid that was expecting to walk in and have one of those books there waiting for me, and then to have it pushed endlessly like they all were, like
because they kept missing their deadlines.
Kept missing deadlines and stuff. So it was like you had these rock star artists that are now trying to run a company and draw these books, and I think they overestimated what they were able to accomplish.
Yeah.
Like many do.
Right. I mean, I can't blame them for trying, but
Didn't they hire a manager of sorts to kind of a circulation manager to try and pull them all together and get them to follow a schedule? Because
Yeah.
they had this unlimited freedom all of a sudden. I think they took too much advantage of it. And I think they decided we better hire someone to help guide us and keep a rein on us.
Larry Martyr was the guy.
One of the business guy to do business.
Yes. So he basically ran it, and he'd set up, he established things that you and I would think about these days as like common sense. Like, hey, how about we don't solicit a book until we actually have some pages drawn?
Seriously.
And you're like, wait a minute, that's a great, so you're proposing that we don't commit to any dates until we have some of the work done?
Things don't go 11 months.
Right. So that was one of the frustrating parts. And I think so they hit it so heavy. They got really super popular. They were fine. They established that they were going to be fine, or they could be fine by that first year or two. And then they started hitting some lulls, and they hit that bubble the same way that everybody else was experiencing as far as that down, the down slope. In
Bubble
the
had to
comics.
burst at some point.
And I think the reason why like Savage Dragon and Spawn kind of survived is Todd took on all the roles that he did, but Spawn was always on time, but that was because I think he admitted he needed help. Like he got other writers in there, and Capullo was drawing very early on. What the late 20s issues or something like that? Like Capullo was already on by that point?
16 to 20.
16 to
26, 37, 39, 41,
Yeah.
43.
So he had already, sought out some talent and was getting some help on his book to make sure that it hit the deadlines, which is, I think that's part of the reason why his was able to go ongoing and there was not really a slump because it was consistent.
Right. Although, I mean, obviously
Because it wasn't because the writing was better.
but the sales were never, those initial 100,000 print runs that,
Millions.
you're doing at some point. I'm sure you got down to 50 or 60,000, but
No, well, so like
Keep the lights on.
The mid 100 books, I think some of the lowest or late 100 books were like 3,600 copies.
wow.
No, they were way down.
It almost died.
Spawn was 1.2 million,
Yeah.
if I recall.
Yeah.
So it started at 1.2 million, and they hit so some of those, if you look on Key Collector or whatever, some of those mid-level spawns are valuable just because you're talking about
so few.
7K that were shipped. It's
crazy.
And can you imagine at that point, you're like, this first issue sold 1.2 million, and you have some now that are like 7K or some crazy number?
Yeah.
So from 151 through 260, basically, they could be down to 4,000 or 5,000
Wow.
per issue.
Which was, what would those years be? I can't quickly do it in my head.
I'd imagine early aughts.
Yeah, it had to be early to late aughts through probably 2014, 15.
Until that 300 came in sight, and then it started ticking back up.
Then it started gaining traction and gaining momentum.
Yeah.
For aspiring artists at home, though, how Image got into trouble, I think, is because of the inconsistency and you go to the store like you said, and you're looking for your fix, and there was no book. It was supposed to be there, and it wasn't there. So aspiring artists need to realize that professional comic book artists draw one complete good page per day, Monday through Friday. If you can't do that, then you can't have a book.
For sure. And it depends. And that's for people that have one book.
Right.
I mean, there are so many people now that have multiples or
On the Spawn, on the early books, so the reason why Gaiman and McFarlane had the big fallout was because whoever wrote it got 50% of the 50% of the book's value, and who owned 50% of the book? Whoever did the art owned 50% of the book, and that's what they were arguing about over the Angela, was because
Todd did the art.
Todd did the art,
And
so
Neil Ross.
he owned half of Angela,
Okay.
but Gaiman created her,
Yeah.
and that was when
So
it
then
all started.
when they were like action figure sales, Gaiman didn't see any of that revenue. And then when they were like trade sales, Gaiman didn't see any of that revenue. He got one lump sum at the beginning. A very nice sum, but it's like...
Based upon that individual issue.
Yeah.
on whatever issue he did,
I think he got 100,000 round just for one issue.
Yeah, but when they're selling,
Yeah. and nothing in
100,000 copies.
and nothing in perpetuity. Like, well, what happens in 20 years when somebody does Angela? You're getting royalties, but I don't, kind of thing.
But wait a minute, isn't that a huge flaw in the premise of Image Comics to begin with?
It was owner creator. I mean, it's just.
I mean, Todd wasn't a representative of
I think he
Image at
thought
that
he was
point.
taking care of him. Like 100,000, here you go. I'm just gonna.
I mean,
hand it
oh
to you.
yeah, that's awesome.
And he was a no
It should
contracts
be
guy.
forever.
He was a no
because they're
contracts guy.
Creator.
I mean, as far as Gaiman's concerned, he wrote an issue or two. I mean, that's not a bad payday for that.
No. But he did it just for Miracle Man, though.
Yeah, did it for leverage.
Yeah, which didn't come out until what, this year?
Yeah.
So
Playing the long game.
Well, Gaiman, he's a bad example anyway. He didn't need it. He already has
No.
like.
Yeah.
He really wanted
I
that
just feel
character.
like
Though.
he
He
should-
really wanted Miracle Man.
If he created a character, even 50%, then he's in for the long haul, no matter what.
Yeah, I agree.
According to the original Image rules,
Agreed.
to me.
I mean,
He doesn't need it, but I'm just worried about him.
no, I get that too. I mean, and I don't know the nuance involved with that, how it went down, because I mean, I can see him and Todd sharing it, but again, I don't have eyes on the contract. I mean, ultimately, I understand what you're saying, but if he signed a contract that said that's the
Yeah,
case, then he
well,
signed a contract.
you're right.
I mean,
There were no contracts. That was the thing. It was
verbal?
It was a verbal agreement. Yeah. McFarlane was really reticent to do anything, to do any contracts. Not in a shady way, just because he was like, no, we don't do contracts. Like, I'm just gonna do well by you, and trust me.
so
And it would have worked for most people, but Gaiman he's a savvy guy.
well, not to mention that was. I mean, it sounds real cool and progressive, but you know how much money they saved not having to deal with that portion of it as a startup?
Sure.
Yeah.
no attorney's fees, no.
Yeah. I mean, you just hop on the internet, you go to LegalZoom, you say, my name is Todd McFarlane, I'm creating Image Comics LLC, and you're out. That's it, right? That's all you got to do. So I think we've kicked around these early books long enough. You want to talk about the books we actually like?
Well, yeah. Well, I'm gonna circle back to Gen 13 though. I like earlier I joked that
Redheads.
I put it on the level of like Tolstoy, but I reread that DC released a hardcover of the original ones last year, and I reread it and I was wrong. It's better than Tolstoy.
I now understand why Jean Grey is popular.
That I'm joking.
Yeah.
No,
Just for the record, it's not better than Tolstoy. Okay.
but I wanted to do this, and I feel, like I said, I feel that nostalgia. Like what I enjoy about those books is the time period of my life. But I didn't read Image books like seriously. Like, these are very good books, probably till like around 2003 ish.
Which is a coincidence, I guess, because Walking Dead and Invincible came out then.
Sure. I mean, and I think subconsciously we've been, we talk about those books so much because they're still
Yeah,
sellers, right?
yeah.
I mean,
that is when they first brought someone else out of the original 7 into the fold.
right.
Writers who could really tell a story.
Because is he creative? Is he chief creative officer or something like
CFO
that?
still.
No, I think Larson is still CFO. I thought that maybe I'm wrong. He might be, or it may have shifted. But I thought Larson was CFO.
And Kirkman's chief creative officer.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, that's chief creative officer. What? Oh, yeah.
CCO.
Operating officer, maybe.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I forgot how letters work for a second. But I got it now.
No, but I mean, that's getting into the minutia. It's who cares. They brought him in, which says a lot about him or how they felt about him.
Eric Larson, Chief Financial Officer.
Yeah.
Since the 90s.
Yeah,
It's only fitting he's handling the green.
Yeah, I don't think you want Kirkman handling the books, but the creative, yeah.
Can't draw feet.
So, man. So Walking Dead, obviously, and Invincible, even in recent years, we've seen the powerful force that is as far as a creator-owned book that has created a worldwide phenomenon. Like, Walking Dead was the biggest thing. It was the show everybody was talking about. It was the water cooler show.
Which is weird because it took, 12 years after its inception to come to screen?
Yes. And Frank Darabont.
Yes,
Frank Darabont
yes.
had a
Made
big
the
part of
first
that.
6 episodes, and they are brilliant.
Yeah.
They're as good as the rest of it was not.
See, I got bored. I'm in that camp.
I got bored immediately.
Really?
And but I didn't like the comic either, personally.
Well, I never had the comic because I had dropped out by then. But
no.
the TV series I thought was good through 5 seasons.
Well, they went through. It just finished.
it's just now done.
I just thought it was a show about unlikable people making poor decisions. It's like I could just go outside for that.
It's about humanity.
Yeah. Well,
Why do they always drive like old '90s Buicks too when they could drive? they could,
You've always talked about this. You're like, why do all these apocalyptic places
drive
by like a Dodge Dart instead of like
find
into the local? Right.
I'm going to the reserves. I'm going to drive out of there in an armored Humvee is what I'm doing.
Right. Who knows?
I know.
You might get eaten on the way, though. That's the problem.
So I played into the hype and I started watching the show because basically, my friend Brad, read Walking Dead, loved Walking Dead. He was like, "Oh, you'd like this and whatever." I'm like, I have never been a zombies guy in any form,
except Romero or Shaun of the Dead. Maybe that's the only two for me.
But
Romero
those,
and the very popular punk.
Yeah.
I mean the British band.
but I mean, but
And Michael Jackson's Thriller. All right, there are exceptions, but I get what you're saying. Like in fiction, popular fiction, and then there was that moment too where zombies were everywhere, and it's like, okay, I mean,
Yes.
I'm so annoyed.
So Anne Rice had the whole vampire thing. There was also a zombie thing. I feel like vampires are so hot right
and
now.
everybody was like, "How do you survive the zombie apocalypse?" Like, well, murder you first, so I won't be annoyed while I figure out how to.
Right. In zombies was always I've never, and I know it's the numbers, right? That's actually overwhelming because as a rational thinker, I think never viewed as a threat. You're like, well, then don't hang around groups of 400 of them.
Yeah.
Go somewhere else. So
It's like the old horror movies where, Jason only ever shambles anywhere and people are running from him for their lives and he still catches them.
you're like,
Yes.
how'd this turn out?
Yeah.
You're like, this is an awful lot like that chase in the Andor show. I'm sorry, I'm going to bring it into this, but if we're going to talk about terrible chases, I'm going to bring, not Andor,
No,
Obi-Wan.
I was going to say, what are you talking
Obi-Wan,
about?
where she's
Leah.
being chased by cartoon characters.
Flea from the Chili Peppers. As soon as he showed up and he was one of the people chasing.
And a 5-year-old outwits him and runs under a bush and they're like, oh.
My big problem with that chase is they didn't even bother doing any
Reese.
film techniques to make it look like it had any speed. It looked like a 5-year-old running from adults and
And it looked like it was shot in
It looked like a Make-A-Wish thing where she was like, yes, honey, you are.
It looked like it was shot in a park in urban Springfield, Illinois.
Yeah.
It was
What is this?
We're going to let you get away because,
because plot.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was, oh goodness. So
A horrible show.
Walking Dead though it went for a while. I mean, Invincible did as well.
Is this still going? Walking Dead?
It is not.
It's done.
They're doing.
Thank goodness.
So
Walking Dead ended the comic ended in 2019.
and what they did immediately was pick it up as deluxe and they colored it.
Yeah. And they went back and they're reprinting it now.
Hey.
So we have polls for it. The same
So it's
book.
coming out in real time, the same way that it did the first time, but now it's deluxe and going monthly.
It's
with the colored
$5 a
issues.
piece, and it's
So they have new cover art, and then they have the original one colored for the A and B. It's brilliant as far as looking them.
It's for the.
But I mean, as somebody that wasn't on board the first time, because I don't know, I'm not a zombie guy. It's not a thing.
Well, no, and
I wasn't because it's a bad comic.
Well, the show for me, I would watch it with my wife, and we would enjoy just very little of it because it's all horrible. And then anything that happens good, anything at all. Oh my God, I found an apple that hasn't spoiled. 14 people get murdered.
Right.
Michonne and Rick hook up.
Yep.
And then 3 seconds later, Negan's knocked on the door, beating people to death.
Yep.
And that's how the show was for me. And there was no joy after you're done watching it for me. It was just depressing as
Predictable
hell.
misery.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
It's like I'm going to stick this needle in my eye repeatedly until something else happens.
it was.
It reminded me of my life.
Oh goodness. That's too dark. But Invincible, I did like. I mean, and it was fun.
It was light,
It was a
it was fun.
fun, light, super hard. I mean, not.
I still think the cartoon made it better in every way.
I do respect Kirkman because he allowed the changes to make it for the better for Walking Dead.
Yeah.
He also encouraged the changes in the show. I should never have done it this way. I think the opening of the, what are they called in that? They're not the Justice, Invincible's Justice League getting murdered right off the bat instead of waiting was a good play. Because, I mean, we talk about this still. We've got that issue #1 for the dollar firsts.
Yeah.
And it's hard to sell that thing because it's Invincible #1 is them eating breakfast. You're like, nothing happens. And the dialogue isn't fantastic. It's just like,
and that's every time I think about Kirkman, Nolan is in the back of my mind because one time we were talking about him and he's like, his dialogue is just horrible.
Yeah.
And I never thought about it until then, but I'm like, his dialogue is horrible.
so for those of you who haven't read, I'm not exaggerating that much. I mean, there's some reveal stuff. Like Omni-Man's like, he pulls him aside and he's like, "You're a wizard, Harry." And he's like, "Oh, I am." And then, and then they eat breakfast. And that's
was it breakfast or was it dinner?
I think it was breakfast because that was before they were off about their days.
Yeah.
Omni-Man hadn't Omni-Manned yet.
Yeah.
And
You guys where the
he was heading
shawarma
off to
comes
school.
from?
No,
The Avengers.
The shawarma?
Just a,
Yeah, is this where that,
Joss
is that
Whedonism.
reference to that?
I don't think so.
Nah. Have you guys ever read Battle Pope?
No.
Oh, it's early Kirkman.
Good?
Oh yeah. It's about the Pope if he was a warrior. Very crass. The world ends. Judgment Day happens, and God picks all the people that were righteous. There are 6 people, and everybody else
only 6?
Yeah, and everybody else is stuck here. And
That
the Pope,
seems high.
the Pope is one of them.
That number seems high.
Yeah, it does. But he gives the Pope has to go save Saint Michael. That's like a demon has Saint Michael, so the Pope has to go. But God gives him that directive. He's like, and if you get Saint Michael and bring him back, you can get into heaven. And he's like, well, I'm not gonna be able to do this. So he's like, I'm an old short guy, and he's like, okay, so he makes him like a big muscle bound dude. And so it's just the rest of the thing is like the Pope, the actual Pope going like he's fucking people, he's shooting people, he's beating people
You're
up,
scaring
he's
me.
fighting demons, and then and
I think I hear thunder rumbling.
he goes 14 issues, but it's a lot of fun. To me, it's the best thing he's ever done because it's the one thing that he did that I really like.
Because he was hungry, you think? Or
Yeah,
was that just
yeah.
he had
it was,
so much
yep,
time
yep.
to work on it? Or?
And again, it's one of those like everything that he's written, more or less to me, seems like it's like something that like a really hyper like high school sophomore would have thought of. But sometimes that's great. Sometimes that's great, and sometimes hey, I thought of great things when I was a high school sophomore. And sometimes it's just sophomoric.
Well, some of it's execution too. I mean, because I also feel like I love Invincible, but I think it probably could have been 75 issues.
Oh yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
Not to critique.
It's
like
either
I
going to be
said,
75 or 150. This 144 nonsense.
Yeah, it's who am I, right? I haven't written anything, but sitting with some time behind us and seeing the show how it condensed things, I'm fairly certain that we could deal with.
I think The Walking Dead could have just been like 4 issues, so we could have all decided not to read more.
a mini.
Yeah.
So then after that,
Not to be negative.
No, I mean,
Still recommending the first 5 years.
you enjoyed the first 5 years.
Yep.
Of The Walking Dead?
Loved
Oh,
it.
the show.
Absolutely loved the series.
The show. Okay.
Well, that second season was just because of the writer's strike. They couldn't think of another. I mean, they couldn't.
The Farm. Oh,
Yes.
I thought that was the best season to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, Lauren Cohen, for one thing,
Well, yeah, but
from Smallville.
Okay, no, I would love for somebody to explain it because that's the most bored I've ever been in my entire life. When
But
Shane's still in the house and he's still around, which is okay.
The farmhouse, yeah.
But they're like, don't go to the farm, don't go to the barn, and they're like, well, why not? Like, just don't.
well, no, and that doesn't make any sense to me at all either. Even looking back on it, because he's like, well, maybe we can change them back, but he wasn't actually doing anything or experimenting to see if he actually changed them back. So he's just
I don't think he
feeding
had any
them.
knowledge to do that. But, those were his friends and family and neighbors.
Yeah, and he was a man of science and medicine who should know a little better. That if you don't actively try to find the cure, you're not going to find the cure.
It's probably depression.
D-
He was a great actor. I thought he did a great job.
I never thought
he convinced
I could
me
watch
totally.
10 people wait around and annoy me at the same time.
Wow.
And that was a season of it. I'm sorry.
no,
And the romance with Lauren and her boyfriend, that didn't interest you at all? Or
You keep Batman's mom's mouth on you.
no, I don't know how to say it. Like, there was so many things.
Apparently.
No,
in another world.
I'm glad Rick's optimism balances out my.
I enjoy it. It's just that
There were some cute,
there were
cool
so
moments.
many times,
As
like
long as
when,
Booster Gold didn't show up.
Oh, nailed it.
When Terminus, like the whole Terminus thing,
That
they're
was
like,
dumb.
hey, everybody, here are the signs. Come this way. And they
Everybody
show
you've
up.
ever met in this world is horrible except for us. So come see us because we won't do anything horrible to you.
We're not going to eat you or anything.
Not going to make you. Yeah.
And how great the first season was. Those first 6 episodes were so good.
Yeah.
It was.
I mean, they
it's
just booted him, and it became like, all right.
How can you dislike a show where the lead hero or the main character's name is Rick?
I mean,
It's a good point. It's a good point.
Until you
Points,
see him
Rick,
speak naturally
yeah.
with this very
He's English.
high-pitched English voice. Yeah, it's not quite the same, Rick.
Carl.
The Punisher.
No, it's Coral.
He's the Punisher.
It was Coral. Coral.
Oh, John Bernthal.
No, it's like Coral. That meme.
That what's his name? Lincoln. That
Yeah,
meme.
Andrew Lincoln. He's crying, like bending down. Coral.
So I'm not. I don't want to end it like this, Rick. I don't want you to cry. It's not. It was just like I feel like I do with all zombie things. That I like the premise. It can start for many different reasons. There can be a conflict, but there's a finite amount of time where it captures my interest, where people aren't offering up real solutions or doing real things to solve their problem. Like
There's only two. There's only
fortifying and running 4 seasons.
Yeah.
Is just like this is the same strategy. What are we working towards here?
Zombieland and Shaun of the Dead are the only two probably, and even Zombieland is iffy sometimes because it goes a little too far, but those are the only two things that I can think of that are zombie-led that I actually would watch just about any time. I mean, Shaun of the Dead is just Shaun of the Dead. Other than that, though, it is boring because
you know what it is for me? Number one, one of the things that I like Shaun of the Dead as well, but I generally don't like humorous things in my adventure. I don't know why that is. And that's why I was, teasing Shayne about Booster Gold. I mean, it's an exciting character and everything, but there's humor in it, and I don't like humor generally. It's at least in these kind of things. But for me, The Walking Dead, what made it really work is I loved all those characters.
That would make perfect sense. There is zero humor involved.
There is zero.
It's very depressing.
Yeah, no.
But I also liked all the individual characters. Every one of those people were people I thought I could hang out with. And so I didn't care that they didn't really make any progress in fighting the zombies, or I just wanted to see them survive because I wanted to see what they were going to do and say because I liked them.
And I think that's part of the thing that he was saying is you were going to be betrayed. Like you fall in love with these people and then you
they get picked off one at a time.
One by one.
Well, that just tears your heart out. I love that. I love to feel the emotion of that.
And then you see how petty they can be, and you see them at their worst moments, and I never walked away from that stuff feeling good.
In season 2, I was actively rooting for the zombies.
You've got to be kidding.
Yeah.
In the barn, too.
But to bring it back to comics, I do...
Why don't you break out of there and eat the food in the house?
I know.
Having said all that, I think Kirkman coming to Image was a great thing for the company.
Well, it sparked off their renaissance, too.
Yes.
Like, they started creating more intelligent, more mature books.
So, I mean, we could run through those lists, too, but even,
Saga,
yes.
Jeez, I mean, come on, Saga.
Saga.
I can sell Saga to any woman that walks in this door because it's just.
Yep.
But it's not a feminist book. Comic. It's just a great book.
And it introduced the world more or less to the great Fiona Staples.
Oh my gosh.
Well, and you would not have. I mean, I don't know if anybody else read them, but I've always been into The Crow.
Oh yeah.
Image
James O'Barr.
Yep, The Crow books. Went over to Image for a time.
They put out American Flag. That's how I read it.
Yep. What else? What are the big things that came out since
Jupiter's Legacy and
Jupiter's Legacy? Yep.
Department of Truth.
Yeah, we can go through all the Remender books.
Yes.
All the great
Black Science.
Great Lemire books.
East of West, my favorite thing ever.
Oh, Hickman's. I've gone through all the
Decorum.
Decorum's great.
Yeah.
The Red Wing, Transhuman, Nightly News, Pax Romana. Hickman's got a deep bench.
Yes.
He just never finished any of his early stuff, but they're still great.
So right now, I'll just go through it and my poll, right? I've got the Radiant books, so I've got all the Supermassives.
Oh yeah.
So that would be Red, Pink, Rogue Sun.
You're doing all those?
All of them. The full universe. I mean, I'm on board. I mean, at this point, I got to a point where I was like, I'm this far.
Yeah, might as well.
Let's do it. Black Cloak, which we've talked on the show about already. Saga, obviously. The Spawn books. I'm actually collecting those again. I'm Gunslinger, King. I think I started with Scorched, but I dropped that because the whole She-Spawn thing I wasn't huge into that to begin with. But it's the Spawn Universe team book.
If you want one, we'll have a couple extra laying around.
Well, recently they've had Lemire's Descender and Ascender, which were great books.
His Bone Orchard stuff is all
Bone Orchard
books.
Is great stuff. Remender's had Hope and Glory, Seven to Eternity, I think was an Image book.
Yes.
Yeah, Black Science, like you said, was one of my favorites.
It's just
Black Science got a little repetitive though.
See, I liked it. I liked it, but yeah, it was
the
like,
same
it was what
thing
what
over
that
and over
narrative
again.
thing they were doing. But
God Country.
God Country, Murder Falcon.
Yep.
Yeah,
Murder
it's still. I mean, even if like the amount of brilliance has slowed up a little bit,
Slumber.
it's still a haven for great writers and artists to do their own stories and
It still is number 3.
and own them outright. Yeah,
It is.
Yeah,
Like they hit that spot from the beginning, and they've maintained that spot.
and for me, they still get on base more than not. I mean,
Well, Boom is encroaching a little bit on that, but yeah.
Yeah.
no,
That
like,
just means we win.
think about it though. Like
Absolutely.
Birthright. I Hate Fairyland, Nailbiter. I mean, how many great series are we not even thinking of that?
Well, and
Hundreds.
it's cool because like what was the Once in Future, right? So like I get to watch, I get to see Mora draw Batman and Superman every month, but then you also got to read his, see his artwork,
See him draw King Arthur as well,
right?
and
And it's just
Lancelot.
like the fact that all of these different entities have learned to coexist, and like I feel like at that initial time period, people were like, "Oh, if you go to Image, like don't bother coming back." Like that was how
yeah.
I felt, right? That was the way it was, and now it was like, okay, well, we'll pay you per page here, and if you want to do something, you're fine.
Go to
you
Image, so you're
So, and I think we owe everything to Image in that way, as far as popularizing that, is and just making it so they have a home or a safe haven. And it's like,
and it's the deal. The writer and artist split everything 50-50 after Image recoups its costs, and that hasn't changed since the inception. It is still the exact same deal,
which
and that's amazing.
which gives you, I mean,
And you have licensing rights. You have everything.
you have
It's
a
yours.
publisher that can help with that initially. And if you believe in your book, you stand to make a ton of money. If you're going into like your book constantly going into a reprint and then a reprint and a reprint, like on every single one of these runs, like think about that. Like think about, I mean, those are the highest selling. Is that taken into consideration the fact that the Spawns actually went back into later on they did trades and then all that stuff, or are those just single issues as far as that list? Do you know?
That's for property.
Just think
so I'm
about
guessing
Saga
I'm
money.
all together,
Including all that stuff.
inclusive.
So does
because Youngblood, I mean, only ran for 3 years, so it has to include the.
But that means that probably just single issues, because I don't know if I've ever seen a trade.
No, I don't ever.
Right? So that's even more mind blowing. If you're counting Spawn's toys with that number,
I'm counting books. I think it was just counting the books. I'm
only
not sure.
books.
Yeah.
So property wise, it would be okay.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about lunch boxes because Spawn has to win, right?
Oh yeah, Todd's got
As
great
far,
toys.
as far as licensing
yeah.
of the Image stuff, like has anybody? I don't recall seeing any Wildcats toys.
Although I do have Saga figures, but
I have
that's
Saga
true. There has been
Pops.
some of that.
but
Saga Pops.
You gotta go to Skybound to get that. You can't go to Walmart like you can with Spawn.
Right, that's true. Yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah.
Very true.
The Todd father has made an industry of himself.
Which we'll take this opportunity to plug. Sorry, while we're talking McFarlane,
These are so dope.
yeah.
Oh yeah,
The new the Dark Knight trilogy dropped today for the McFarlane toys. There's Scarecrow, there's Batman, there's Joker, and there's a Harvey Dent. And those
And then the
four-
Build-A-Figure is Bane.
Yes, and they look fantastic.
Oh my God, they look so good.
We actually got our hands on some before they sold out at the distributor level. So
Did they already?
Yeah.
they sold out. Yeah. So, well, I mean, they'll probably do it again, but I'm saying if you want them at release between March
is-
and May, whatever,
It's May. It's the end of May is when they actually come.
then so we have them up on our website now. If you guys want to check it out, www.varcade.com. We have some of those sets that we were actually able to get for sale. So go check that out. But that's just another testament. Like,
Well, he's
While
also
we're talking about-
bringing back like the DC Superpowers line
Yes.
from the 80s that I
feel-
adore but could never get, and he's re-releasing them with new characters and old characters that were from the original line.
and that's where
He's a fan, and I love it.
and Todd has been there since the beginning of Image, and I feel like
He was the first real superstar too, the young superstar. Like in the early or the mid '80s when he showed up, he was like a rock
yes.
star to them.
And he just like
And he's never gone away. He's only
he didn't have to make the toys. He just decided to, and he's like, but if I'm going to do it, I'm going to make the best toys. And I truly believe that he is.
dude. I had all the original Sin City toys before the movies came out, like from the original
Yeah.
comics, and those were some of the cool. Like I had Marv on the electric chair.
Yeah.
It was the coolest thing coolest toy I've ever had.
I think he's had the same impact on toys as he has on comics.
The quality
changed the game.
The face sculpts, they're superior to almost everything else.
And just from, they're cheaper than the Marvel Legends stuff.
Yeah. And they're better quality.
and the fact that he had the DC licensing wrapped up.
Man,
like
it was a happy day.
Yeah, I mean,
It was a Booster Gold, right?
Hey, I have a Booster Blue Beetle
Yeah.
from McFarlane's. Thank you very much.
they're cool. They're very cool. So, and
But he's also done Princess Bride. He's done all these other weird properties.
He
but-
licenses like Escape from L.A.
Yes.
The Thing.
cool stuff, like
Sleepy
stuff
Hollow.
that people like us would like to have.
we-
toys
Like,
for.
what would I like if I had?
We have
toy
a
company?
Fezzik downstairs. We have an Andre the Giant Fezzik. It's just amazing.
It's cool. It's like to compare like size wise, like imagine a regular action figure is like a 4-inch Funko. Like the Fezzik's like a 10-inch. It's like in a bigger box. It's
As it
massive.
should be.
It's cool.
Yeah.
And I think that he's Todd in particular, like I think it's cool like how he's had some integrity as far as like, you know, you see like Coke cans with Stan's name on it and stuff like in the later years where he was getting taken advantage of, whatever. But like he refuses. What I'm trying to get at is
There was
Todd
stuff he will
refuses-
sign. There's stuff he will and will not sign,
He absolutely will not sign a book if he had no involvement in it.
unlike Stan.
Oh,
Like
cool.
So if you if Todd has if you bring him a 300, he'll sign it because he created it. He'll sign it because he drew on it in the cover or whatever else. If you bring him something, you know, if you bring him like a Venom book, he will sign a Venom book because he created Venom. It could be any Venom book, but he won't just sign a Spider-Man book.
Yep, that's fine. I made that.
Right. So, but so I think
I
that's,
didn't know if I had a McFarlane. Turns out I do.
was that what that was?
Yeah. Yep. Have you ever heard him talking?
Yeah.
Very, very distinctive.
Yes, yes.
And very. Did you watch the Spawn show on HBO?
Oh, yeah.
The animated.
Oh,
the
yeah.
First one.
Yeah.
That was the first time that I feel like that was before DC was even playing the game. I mean, animated series, right?
It was a very.
But it was before DC started doing the more adult. So it was like the first
Oh yeah.
one.
That was the '90s.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a very good adaptation of the comics, but the comics were still bad. But it was still cool.
Yeah, but
It looked cool.
Keith David
Felt cool.
as
Oh
the
yeah. No, it
voice
was
was like-
it was awesome,
dude, it
awesome.
was very awesome.
That and the Max. I mean,
Yep.
our cup ran its
Was
over.
that, was that MTV?
MTV was the Max. Yeah. That and Ian Flux, I think, were the same block.
That's awesome.
And I do want to point out though, these guys also gave Kirby work.
Yes.
In the '90s. And they went out of their way to do that. So they were guys that loved comics and loved creators, and wanted them to get their due.
Because and that was looking into it. We've read so much about it recently. I don't want to mess up any of the stories, but I know Perez, like all of the legends, as far as the people that they were inspired by, they tried to involve in different ways as well, as far as keeping them.
The ones that would actually come, you know.
Yes.
Some of the old school, like Rick said, didn't like it, but you know.
We, from the fan standpoint, we were just frustrated because we were enjoying X-Men and Wolverine and Spider-Man, and all of a sudden our books got ruined. So
How dare you try to make money for yourself and your family?
yeah, it was frustrating, as a
Yes,
fan.
but-
But then later we realized what they were trying to do.
Yes,
and
you're
it
saying
became
in
okay.
2023
That
it
makes sense.
seems so simple, but it wasn't anything but.
But yeah, as a fan at the time, I'd have been like, "Whoa, what? All of a sudden, my favorite, they're all gone." Yeah.
I just switched over. I'm like, ooh, so this
followed 'em.
is what they're doing now. It must be amazing. But even then, that feeling and that even 10-year-old Craig knew. He's like,
Having X-Men kind of go downhill slowly over 5 or 6 years until Grant Morrison came was a shot.
it was painful.
Yeah, didn't.
Because I remember, so I was reading actively. I started like right around. I mean, Gambit was there.
Yeah,
Rogue was
266.
there. Yeah. They're developed
The
their
blue and gold
relationship-
teams, and then
Yep,
and then
blue
the
and gold teams.
and then the animated show, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but then Fabian came on, and I really liked Age of Apocalypse very much, that event. But that's about it in that wasteland that I can think of. I didn't like Onslaught, and until Grant came in 2000 and kind of rebooted it,
It took a while.
I was out of the game. Speaking of Image Comics,
No, it's fine because
It's all woven together anyway.
it is.
it really is.
That's the whole point.
These are all the books.
It's a narrative.
And even at that rate, at the end of the day, Jim Lee just went back to DC and decided to run that. I mean, so
he
everything
did
moved
Hush around 2002.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
And career work too. Yeah.
how
That was
long?
a great day for DC.
Yeah.
How long has he been like an officer
God,
over at
since
DC
like
now?
2015 or something.
Yeah. So it's been a few years, and it's crazy. Like so, last year when they launched, do you remember it was like all the service? It was the comics wrapped up with all their new series.
DC Universe Infinite or
Yeah,
like that.
and they had like the daily. They did like the daily their daily like show that was like supposed to be like X Play, like the video game type shows, right? And he'd be on there just like sketching pictures.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it blows my mind. Like,
I saw him once on Pimp My Ride with X to the Z, and he drew a flash on a car, and it was awesome. Just as a fun anecdote.
just, I mean,
I wish my car had a drawing of Flash by Jim Lee on it.
no kidding. So, I mean, I don't think any of these Marvel books are off limits for an Image podcast because they made them huge.
Oh yeah,
and then tried to make
Marvel's got to
something
get some
even bigger.
love, and it will.
Can I go back to one other thing? Really left turn again, but you were saying how it was very honorable of Todd to not sign books that he didn't have anything to do with.
I think so.
Yeah, and I get that, and I think that is true. But I'm going to say I asked Bob Layton to sign an Iron Man book that he didn't have anything to do with, and he did say, "Hey, I didn't do anything on this," which of course I knew. But I was so excited to see Bob Layton from here in Indiana, that great artist and writer and one of the best of Iron Man ever. I wanted to commemorate the fact that I was having an interaction with him, and I begged him virtually to sign this book, and he did, and he wrote, "This is where we all started," which was a kind of an honorable way of doing it.
cool.
So
But with Todd though too, we're not taking any money out of his kids are getting fed because CGC released their most 2 graded books ever. One was Amazing Spider-Man 300, and the other one was Spawn #1.
wow.
So,
The top 2.
yes, the top 2.
As in, like, and
That's crazy.
I feel like there's something to that too, because you can't just send a 300 in and get a 9.8 like you can in the other book.
No.
I think they're purposely started dragging their feet on those because we've sent in some
doozies.
cherry books, and
Yeah.
they're like, "Well, this one
9.6.
here is that really a red or is that more of an orange?" You're like, "What?" So I mean, I think there's so many out there. They're trying to do some favors.
It might be a favor for it to be a 9.6 though because they're so rare.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
thought it was weird. Like the print runs were so high on those, and
Yes.
those are the ones that you send in to get graded.
Yeah.
Cool. They look great.
we'll be
Look
What is
because
we're
you-
coming up on that time now where the people that grew up with those books are now of age and have money.
Yeah.
They're trying to relive their childhood. They're trying to regain some of that. So
well, and they're artsy looking. I mean,
Oh, 300.
they're striking
They look-
covers.
they look
I mean,
great.
everybody in the world. Everybody in
Everybody's
the world
an
has
homage.
copied the 300 cover.
Yeah,
Period. I mean, Todd's done it 300 times
with Spawn.
with Spawn. So
Yeah. So they created their own thing. I know it's impacted me, and I don't know if it's come through on the episode, but I think at least Shayne and I have been talking a lot about it. I mean, I know you were
Love
kind of
the
out
Image
of it,
books.
so I appreciate you being a sport on this one, Matt. Because
it's been a rough week.
Well,
Yeah.
we should do a Hickman episode too, where we just get to talk about East of West. And
I would talk about East of West for an hour and a half
Yeah,
myself.
Just talk about all those great books.
and I think we should break.
We should break down
Something
to
down.
we could break it down to writers, artists, whatever.
For sure.
For all you out there, if your comic needs are not being met, if you have no local comic book store, give the arcade a call or visit us at www.thercade.com. We can be your comic book shop. We ship all over the country. Just trying to help you out because another thing, please support your local comic book stores, everyone. They are not doing as well as you think they are.
Thank you.
Thank you.